Welcome back. You're watching Business Today, and we are going to be focusing on matters tourism in a few minutes from now. And, well, the latest data showing how the sector has performed have just been released by the Ministry of Tourism. Well, so far, the inbound tourism and international arrivals have taken a sharp decline of 72% compared to arrivals in 2019 between January and October in the 2 years. This was as a result of the closure of the borders and the airspace occasioned by COVID-19 outbreak. However, with the partial reopening of the airspace in August, there was a gradual but slow increase in the arrival numbers, while majority of tourism businesses was sustained by a spike in domestic tourism. Well, let's now put more perspective to it by numerical comparisons and get the effects and some recommendations for a bounce back in the industry. Over to you, Brian George Otieno, our newest addition to the KTN Business Desk. Welcome on board, Brian.
Thank you so much, Abby, for joining this assailable team. And now let's dive deep into the numbers and put to perspective 72% nosedive is not just any number to, toy about, especially in the tourism industry. And now let's look at the numbers. Last year, 2019, the number of arrivals between January and October was about 1.7 million, way over 1.7 million. Now, the cumulative number of arrivals in the tourism industry from January to December in 2019 was well over 2 million, and I think 40,000 thereabout. So, this year we saw a spike, and of course it's because of COVID-19. Now, 470,971 is the number of international arrivals and inbound tourism that we received in the country. Now, let's look at the numbers in terms of earnings. In 2019 alone, between that period, January and October, we were able to get 147.5 billion shillings. Now, all this cumulatively put, we made a loss of 110 billion to come and achieve just 37 billion by October 2020, which paints a grim picture of this industry that has been worst hit by COVID-19. Of course, because of the cessation of movement, a lot of borders were closed down, and of course, we were looking at the airspaces that were a bit shut. Now, let's look at why people traveled. 35.11% of the majority of the people that traveled between January and October traveled because of business, surprisingly. Now, and then we look at those that traveled for holiday, which is 19.92%. This, of course, was affected mostly by the reduction of disposable income, which is a factor that helps people to travel, disposable income and time. And of course, we're looking at those people who are just passing through Kenya, and that was 6.32%. Now, let's go to why people, what percentage of people traveled for medical reasons, and that was 1.53 of the total number of 470,000. And then bringing it down to education, there are people who travel to Nairobi to Nairobi University, to Moi University for studies, and that in this year alone, between January and October, was 1.18%. Pilgrimages and religious travel was only 0.52%, and of course, for sporting activities was 0.10%. Now, let's break it down further to the source markets. Where do the tourists come from in terms of countries? The country that gave us more tourists this year was number 2 last year. US gave us the most numbers last year, but this time Uganda, which was number 2 last year in our tourism arrivals, gave us the most. So our neighbors are supporting us. Now, 60,000. And 60,399 people from Uganda traveled to Kenya, followed closely by the United States of America, 53,444, well over 50,000, and then Tanzania was third. They are the ones that traveled mostly to Kenya between January and October. And of course, the other countries, well, let's look at those countries that least traveled to Kenya. Now, Egypt. It comes at number 30 because the report that was released by the Tourism Ministry only put together or tabulated data from 30 countries. Now, Egypt was the last we received the list of guests from Egypt in Africa, and then Japan followed in by 3,099, and then Zimbabwe gave us 3,111. 3,114 rather, I beg your pardon. And then Spain gave us 3,118. And then finally Pakistan was almost the leading in that category. 2021 projections for the tourism industry. Of course, we have seen a spike in domestic travel. More Kenyans took to domestic tourism, and that has helped to cushion this industry that has been worst hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, we've had salary reductions. Some people lost jobs completely, and so domestic tourism is expected to spike even more. Now, let's look at a slow but steady recovery of the industry is expected. Of course, when you're not receiving your biggest spenders, who are the international tourists, we expect a bit of a slow, a bit of slow recovery. And of course, we need now to reinvent, to get more tourism business models, and of course, reinvent our means of tourism. Let's now go to the last bit of this presentation and look at more recommendations that we could look into to achieve much more with the travel industry. Now, more travel expected to spike with the AfriCities conference that is going to be held in Kisumu in next year. And lastly, we need to also explore alternative methods of tourism. So that is how the numbers are looking like. Over